The way this project is unusual is that we are actually pursuing a principle. I really believe that form follows feeling, and feeling is really what space and architecture are about. Space actually affects people.
Design matters. It's why we spend the time making the decisions we do. Those things that we as designers intuit, neuroscience is now proving have an effect. Google created an exhibition that is showing design's impact on our biology.
The way that I explain neuroaesthetics, it's really simple. It's basically how your brain changes on the arts. When you have a heightened aesthetic experience, like a piece of music, a sunrise, things that really elevate your everyday experiences, they change you. They change your biology, they change your mood, they change your emotion.
I called Suchi Reddy and I said, taking the neuroaesthetic principles, could you create 3 different rooms that would evoke different responses?
The goal is to see how people resonate with space and to really find out whether what they think they resonate with is what their body is actually resonating with.
We respond to the aesthetics of our environments, whether we realize it or not. The band can demonstrate with data from the sensors that actually is happening. Heart activity, respiratory activity, skin temperature, skin conductance. We figure out from the data which room is the one that feels the calmest or the most at ease for people.
Where does your physiology feel most peaceful? I think it's what people are searching for. The space between the notes, the place where they can come and just be.
The interiors where we work and where we live have a deep impact on our well-being. We've always known it and believed in it, but we haven't been able to quantify it and prove it. You enter a space and it's like, I like it, but why?
This is about data used as a mirror back to yourself. Data is just a bunch of numbers, and we wanted to make it artistic in its expression.
It can be really hard to put an aesthetic experience into words. But suddenly by combining science and technology, we get a new language.
We've selected room 2 as the room that you were the most calm in.
Maybe a watercolor can tell more than 1,000 words.
Technology has the ability to help you know yourself better. The problems of the future are only going to become more complicated. Solutions have to happen in this collaboration of technology, the arts, and science.
Hi, I'm Ivy. I think we're waiting for Susan.
Let's see. Oh, great. Yeah, actually, we just had Susan, and we'll probably have her again in just a moment. Okay. So we lost her between the rooms. And so, Ivy, while we're waiting for Susan, I would love for you to share a little bit about, your passion for the space in between. The in between the moments. One of the things that you said in the video, just about the spaces between, it really touched me. And so I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about your passion for that.
Yeah, I think we spend so much time on the doing, from one thing to another, that actually the pause, and I recently did an exhibition in Tokyo that was called The Pause with Lee Edelcourt, because it really is about that moment in between is where a lot of the power is. I know I do some sound healing, and that's what you find is it's the space between the 2 notes where the resonance is and where the healing is. So I think it's what's happening a little bit to us now. Mother Nature is enforcing a pause. because I don't think we do enough of it. So it's kind of, we're having a time out to really figure out what's essential.
Here we have Susan. Okay.
Hi there.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. So, hi, Susan.
Hi, I had a technical difficulty. I apologize.
No problem. So, you know, I haven't looked at that video, the little video for a while, but I can't believe that was 2018. It feels like 10 years ago. And it was such an important milestone, I know, for the work that you do and the work that I do. I'd love, you know, let's talk a little bit about what this exhibit means to you and meant to you when we did it.
Well, first of all, it's really exciting to be here with you and to be part of this conference. And I'm really bummed out that I missed the video. I love that video. It's just, it sort of takes me back to a really amazing place. And since time is so vertical right now, it's not hard to get there. So for me, this exhibition was really the first time that the public had an opportunity to use biomarkers and also marry that to the human-built environment. So it really was, in some ways, a way to pull back the curtain on what we understand about space through neurobiology. And you know, this field of neuroaesthetics, neuroarts, neuroarchitecture, there's lots of language around it, has really been brewing for the last 15 years or so. Both from the basic science point of view, where we've been understanding the neurobiology of sensory systems and motor systems and how our bodies respond to all kinds of stimuli across a range of spectrum, but also the way practitioners like designers and architects and others that are really interested in space and place have been intuitively understanding what works and what doesn't. And I think what we're starting to see now is this convergence of arts and science coming together, where the lines are getting blurred around what it means to be an artist and what it means to be a scientist, and focused on what it means to solve really big problems. And you know, that has been the way it was since the beginning of human history. Philosophers and poets and designers all thought about how we feel in space and how we are transformed in these different elements around space. So in some ways, we're coming back to a new, old, ancient knowing, but having that be informed by some of the technology advances and really understanding at a molecular level what's happening. And I think this convergence of disciplines that we're calling neuroarts is really about collaboration and about team science, and problem solving. And so when I think about that exhibition, in many ways, for me, it was sort of bringing all of that forward and saying, you know, there's a way to marry these things in a really beautiful way for helping us be more human. How about you? What did you learn in A Space for Being? How did it really change you?
Yeah, and to give a little context, I mean, what the experience was, I mean, we're calling it an exhibition. It was in Milan at the design fair. About 300,000 people from all over the world come, but it was 3 distinctly different environments that were all done on neuroaesthetic principles. We engaged a third partner in crime here, Suchi Reddy, the architect, and using kind of Susan's principles from the Arts and Mind Lab, looked at how do we create 3 distinct environments that through sense, sound, texture, color, shape, light, would affect your body differently in each environment. And we chose a state we were looking for people to come to, which was what we're calling at ease, but it's the least stressed, basically. And the band that you saw was put on each participant. There was only about 5 people allowed in the room, 5 minutes each room. We invited people, they could touch the art. The rule was no technology, no talking, put their phones away, no pictures, and just be. and then, let the sensors kind of pick up what was happening in your body. And then you go through a palate cleanser. It was like a soundproof room, and then go into the next space, and then a palate cleanser in the next space. And at the end, you would get a printout of how your body was reacting in each of the 3 different rooms, and ultimately showed you in which room was your body most at ease, and then told you the elements that was in there. So, what was great, and there was a big question, right? It was a hypothesis of, would the rooms that people like better, which is more a cognitive mind thing, is that actually the room that their body feels better in? And, our hope was that it wasn't always necessarily going to match, because that shows that you might be thinking one thing, but your body's feeling something else. So what was great is, we deleted all the individual data, but anecdotally, just through, as we were handing out the results to the individuals, we would talk to them, and it was great. I'd say more than half of the people were totally surprised. They said, oh, I liked room number 2, but wow, my body felt more comfortable in room number 3, which it really, what we wanted to show, first of all, is that your body is feeling all the time. That I think in some ways we become disembodied and we forget we have a body, and that constantly, I think we become the environment, and we're very porous, and the environment becomes us. And so it affects us, the environments we're in, and we forget that because we're very focused on the cognitive mind. But it was great that, first of all, people realized their body's feeling all the time, and then realized the fact that sometimes their body is feeling something different than their mind is thinking. So that was really, really what I learned out of it. And it kind of, our hypothesis was correct. But it was beautiful to see people's surprise and delight. And, they really asked us a lot of great questions. So Susan, I'd love to ask you, maybe you could share some of the basic scientific phenomena that helps us understand this. Because I know when you first called me a few years ago to be on your advisory board, and you said that, art and design matters and affects our biology, I was like, yeah, of course it does. I've been doing that my whole life. Mm-hmm. She said, well, and at first I kind of was, science doesn't have to prove that. And then I realized, wait a minute, what am I saying? I know that intuitively, but the truth is, it's great if science can prove the things that some of us artists and designers and people in the arts know intuitively. So that's how our relationship started. But yeah, I would love for you to just chat a little bit about some of that scientific phenomena.
Yeah. No, I know. I think of it as new knowledge, but not replacing intuition. It's just more information for artists to be able to use in their work. And you never know, with that content, with that additional information, what will happen. And that's sort of the beauty of, I think, arts and science together. One of the things I wanted to go back to is, as Ivy was describing the way people move through the rooms, and they got this really gorgeous watercolor circle. And as they entered the room, that was 12 o'clock. And then it was half past, let's say 12:30, 12:45, and then back up to noon. And you could literally see, as a guest going through the room that you were most at ease in, whether or not your flames of watercolor were exaggerated or whether they were calm. And so the participants were able to see where they were excited, where they were off baseline, and then where they were really calm. And they could actually tell us in the moment, oh, I was sitting there reading this book, or I walked in and I smelled charcoal and it just made me feel so, I felt that in that instant. And these are like really nanosecond instantaneous changes that their bodies were picking up, but they didn't, as Ivy was saying, they didn't consciously even say that. And in some cases, they actually their error in thinking about which room was the right room had more to do with their sort of cognitive thinking, their conscious thinking, as opposed to their unconscious body really responding. And I think that sort of segues into this idea about what are some of the sort of baseline principles that we've built off of. And these are sort of high level, zoomed out kind of concepts. And the first, which I think is super important, is neuroplasticity, that our brains are changing all the time. And that, you know, while there are some critical periods of great change in terms of neuroplasticity, you know, early learning, and it turns out now that adolescence is also a really incredible fertile time where these windows of big neuroplastic changes can happen. They actually happen throughout the lifespan. And so we know that when you are exposed to different environments, depending on your conditioning, looking at genetics, also with a big factor of thinking about cultural influences, that your brain and body are changing. And that is sort of an extraordinary opportunity for healing, for growth, for innovation, for thinking about creativity, and for thinking about how spaces can help to create those types of experiences that you need and want, whether you're at home or at work or in the community. And the second is embodied cognition. And that's really, there's been a lot of really interesting work done in this area of embodied cognition. And it's really basically talking about the fact that our bodies bring the world in through these sensory systems, and they are extraordinary organs, and they bring the world in different ways. But, you know, I think about it often as this idea around vibration and different frequencies, and how our visual systems or our auditory systems are bringing in these different levels of knowledge, and we feel them first. And then we are able to translate them into emotions, and then we translate them into thoughts and behaviors. And that, again, can happen in a very rapid sequence. But the more we understand about embodied cognition and those processes, there's an opportunity to think about how you can construct spaces, whether they're, you know, spaces in urban design, or whether they're interior spaces, for us to be able to be more optimized in how those spaces work for us. And then there's a lot of great work that's been done really over the last 50 years, looking at sensory systems and motor systems. Most recently, in the last several years, there's been, I think, some revelatory work done understanding the default mode network, which is really the sort of midline space that is your internal dialogue, and it's what how you define what your preferences are, how you sort of talk to yourself about where you are in the world, and it's something that helps us think about preference. So the room that I most felt at ease in was different than the room that one of my colleagues felt most at ease in, based on that sort of preferential knowledge that we gain and then figure out how we use throughout our lives. And then I think the last area that we spent some time thinking about, again, at a high level, is learning and memory. What are these optimal conditions, how we learn? And that some way moves us into this larger concept of neuroaesthetics. And John Chatterjee is a neurologist at University of Pennsylvania, and he and his colleagues developed something called the neuroaesthetics triad that really tries to provide a model for what is a heightened aesthetic experience. And basically it's where your sensory systems, your backgrounded experience, and your biology come together. And in the center of that sort of Venn diagram is a deep aesthetic experience where learning and memory are heightened because of the strong neurotransmitters, whether that's dopamine or serotonin, or it could be cortisol. But this, and I guess I'll also say that not all aesthetic experiences are necessarily pleasant. And so how we have these deep learning and deep memories tie into this idea of a very heightened experience that we think of as aesthetics with a capital A. So those are some of the things, Ivy, that we thought about, and I think we're really thinking about how to translate those into practice as we build a space for being. So I guess, Ivy, I'd like to turn it back to you as a designer. how do you see this work fitting into your worldview and design? Like where I know you're already, it was 2 years ago, so I know you're already taking it in lots of different directions, but how does this fit for you?
No, well, I think, through our relationship and learning more about what the Arts and Mind Lab is doing, this idea that I always knew, aesthetics is not just making something look pretty. Aesthetics, as you say, is this idea of alivening the sensory system. And I think that, especially right now, we're craving it, because I think we've gotten a little flatlined and we forgot what it is that makes us happy and makes us feel alive. And so alivening the sensory systems in anything, even the things we look at, the things we touch, but certainly the spaces we're in, the rooms we walk into. I mean, I think is such at the center of what great design should be, both whether it's small design or architectural spaces. Mm-hmm. I know, the architects of the past were also philosophers and doctors, because they understood that even when you're creating space, you had to understand the cognitive mind, you had to understand movement, all this multidisciplinary factors, which I think is actually where we're headed in a lot of ways, both in design and all fields, is to kind of solve the complex problems we have on our hands. We're going to need a lot of this multidisciplinary groups coming together. But I think it's the perfect time that this information is coming forward, because like I said, a lot of us who understood that the arts and these things that aliven our senses have an effect on our health and our well-being. Oh, it's now being proven. Sorry, Susan, we can hear some background, something going on in the background there.
I have a dog issue.
Okay, so I would love to come back to you. And I know since we did this exhibit, and by the way, people waited online, 3 hours to experience it, which we found, I was very nervous when we saw that. It's like, oh my God, are they going to be disappointed? But it was interesting to see how curious people were. First of all, asking them to just be in a space was revolutionary. I mean, they were out there in a crowded exhibit, and then they would come in here, and the first thing we said is, you can't talk, you can't look at your phone, just be and sense the space. I mean, people, just that alone, I felt like was a gift, essentially. But anyway, and of course, people asked me afterwards, Google, are you going to produce this band? And I said, no, I do not want a world where we have to walk around wearing bands to tell us how we're feeling. The idea here was to show and make people aware that we do have a body that's feeling all the time, and that these little things that you may think are little and subtle all speak to our cells and aid in our well-being. But I know since the exhibit, Susan, you've gotten a lot of calls and people who want to use some of this to inform the work that they're doing. But maybe we have about 8 minutes left. You could just tell us where the work is being used, where are some of the more interesting places it's being used, mm-hmm. and what's some of the cool technology and tools that you've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think this idea around agency and knowing what you are feeling, not only what you're thinking, and marrying those things together. So heightened awareness turns out to be a very important takeaway from the exhibit. And you don't need a tool on your wrist to do that, but it is about paying attention. And I think the pandemic has actually made us all pay more attention to what we need to feel less anxious, less stressed, less panicked. And I think we are finding that. And I think we're finding it in our homes. Even if you look at the catalogs that you're getting at home right now, their bedding, their sheets, their robes, their things that are around texture and comfort. And I think that's a natural outgrowth of how we're feeling about wanting to feel safe and wanting to feel at ease to the extent that we can. The social justice work that has risen up around under-resourced communities and health disparities, it's really shown a spotlight on the role of culture and culture across all communities. So what does it mean to be in community and have your art and culture grow? And how does that affect things like isolation, loneliness, empowerment, social cohesion within a community? And those things are all physical manifestations. What does housing look like in an under-resourced community to help bring people together? So instead of going up, what if you were creating courtyards and spaces for people to come together and to be able to be neighbors, to really work as neighbors as opposed to sort of housed in a space? We're also seeing a lot of work in schools and in the justice system in terms of detention centers. And there's some really great models that are starting to emerge. Norway has an amazing program for building prisons that are really about rehabilitation, not about punishment. And the space is allowing for that. We're also seeing it in Alzheimer's care and dementia care, where villages are being created that remind people of where they lived. So there's a cultural connective tissue back to that. So their familiarity, as opposed to lifting people up and moving them into a space that's totally unfamiliar. Ivy mentioned virtual spaces. Virtual spaces are growing exponentially. There's some amazing things that are happening within museums right now, where they're bringing their collections to virtual spaces, but also virtual spaces are being used in health and well-being. There's a program called Snow World that's been created that uses distraction and attention diversion when someone is in acute pain, particularly in a burn unit where bandages are being changed. These virtual spaces and places are being created, and it's not totally clear what's happening, but there is a cognitive load that's being moved to another stimuli as opposed to a very painful physical stimuli. So we're seeing a lot of things happen there. One or two other, I think the use of AI and machine learning to personalize devices is happening more and more. And so it may not be something on your list, but it may be that behaviorally you have shared that a certain temperature works best in your house over time. And now your temperature when you come into your home is that temperature, or certain lighting at a certain time of day, or thinking about certain scents that really seem to help you position or bring you to a different state of mind that you're interested in. And the last thing I'll say is that we're seeing more things around conscious cities. And by that, I mean, how does a city work together? And so rather than a municipal group sort of saying, here's what the city needs, it's a bottom-up approach to where the community is coming in and being part of that design process. So they're not just coming to someone else's table, they are the table, and they are saying, this is what our community needs, this is how we want to do that. And we want to bring artists and designers into that early stage and thinking about what's the role of art and culture in a community, and what is it that's important to us, not what you think we need. And that's a huge shift across a lot of different sectors, including the workplace, where if the first wave was physical health, the second wave was mental health, the next wave is going to be looking at this idea of art care and art health, and how do you bring that forward? So Ivy, I know we're probably running short on time, but do you want to talk a little bit about some of the sort of essential elements that you think are really important for how we continue to build this work?
Well, I'm really intrigued with this idea that art will save our lives or play a role in making us healthy. And I think that the way I'd like to wrap it up is really saying that, I think we all need to become, social engineers in some way. And I think design is about solving problems. And now that we have, what I love most and hope for the future is this coming together of art and science so that we can really enhance the well-being of humanity together. And what do you hope, Susan?
Well, I think acknowledging the complexity of the challenge, the humanity, and celebrating this that is so uniquely human, which ability to be creative, have creative expression in practice, and somehow is sort of the holy grail and superpower that I'm hoping we can really lift up. So I'm incredibly excited about the future, and I think that there is, I think it is happening. It's this really becoming very present in the world, and so it's very exciting.
Yes. So, and I look forward to more projects with you where we can prove out the importance of this work.